This is the Good Ride review of the Jones Carbon Flagship. We rode this with Union Atlas, Union Falcors. What was it? The Jones, it's the Mercury or Apollo, one of those. And you know, our trusty Adidas tactical ADVs. Took this out in all kinds of conditions. Everything from some deep powder to some hard groomers to some perfect soft groomers today. To give this a quick summary, this is just the steroided version of the Flagship. And it's got a new shape, new nose, new tail, more taper, I think 12 mil of taper, where it used to only have a few mil. So it's really changed in terms of how it rides. It's much more surfy, much more off the tail, much less double-ender in feel, much more free ride, kind of evolved. And this board was starting to get stale. Both the Flagship and Carbon Flagship were starting to get a little stale, and this just brought it back to life and made it so much more fun. If you want a little more slashy, a little more surfy, but you still want to fucking bomb, and you still love to carve, not the best carver, but a very good carver, then this is the call over the regular Flagship. I think most would like the regular Flagship just for all types of conditions you ride. But if you ride perfect shit.
But then you don't get that carbon top sheet.
Yeah, that is pretty cool. And let's do the Flex
off.
Oh, this thing is stiff. It's not as stiff as it used to be, but it used to be just like you had to like warm up and stretch. And you can see this is just like, maybe you can't, because you know, like the way I'm holding it, it's got a lot more give when I do this. And that's the 64.
Yeah, which is clearly going to be as stiff as the 61. So.
Yeah, and it's stiff. It can butter barely, but it's a lot of work, man. It's not easy. It's got pop though. It doesn't feel dead like the Ultra Mind Expander felt a little dead when it came to pop, getting the board to pop. It had that spring out of the turn, but it just didn't feel poppy or lively. It just felt ultra damp and dead a little bit when it came to buttering and trying to get air, where these have a little more spring out of them. You know, but they're not really butterers. Camber profile, you know, you can see on the table review, you can see this like kind of hybrid camber. Camber going a little past the bindings and then a lot of early rise. It makes it, for how damp and how aggressive it is, it makes it very forgiving. You can skid turns with this, which is really surprising. Most boards of this flex shape and power don't, like, they destroy you if you fuck up. This is very forgiving for how
I mean, I was skidding turns the whole time I was filming you, because you can't really carve while you're filming, but you know,
it didn't like start out the sketch alarm.
Not too bad. You gotta pay attention to what you're doing, but I think it's not super consequential. But
yeah, it doesn't catch an edge as easy as you would think at all. And so it could even, like, if you're just an intermediate who's just probably trying to get yourself injured, you know?
Just want a straight line.
Yeah, you're really into straight lining, but then you want to skid at the bottom.
It's a good
or you're riding steep areas with tight spots where you have to skid your turns.
Right.
You know, unless you're just like the ripper of rippers. But that's what I like about all these Jones boards, is they have that aggressive, stiff nature, but they've got easy float and they're forgiving, and that's kind of cool. So sizing wise, you definitely be like 165 wide or like whatever it is.
But
like
I had fun on the 64.
2 wide or something like that.
Yeah, I would go 165 wide maybe, or whatever's closest to this. But like you said, but this was fun. 64 was good. This is probably
25/4 waist.
Yeah, which is pushing it. Even with the size down, Adidas Tacticals, which are 10.5.
Yeah.
But yeah, I rode this. I had a great time on this board. That was fun. Amazing edge hold.
Oh yeah, it grips hard
and it's fast
and bombs hard,
fast,
and it you can definitely feel the extra taper. I felt it washing in the tail when I didn't drive off the back, when I didn't put the weight on the back foot on a turn. Sizing wise, for me, I felt kind of torn between the 64 and 61. I liked the control and the quickness of the 61. I'd rather have this in the trees. On the deepest of deep days, and when I'm bombing, I'd rather be on the 64. So I felt kind of in between there. I thought I'd be all about the 64 lately. I've been riding a little wider, a little bigger, but actually the 61's all I need. I might be happier with the 64 and the regular Flagship,
right?
But I felt like I could control both pretty well. This is just a little faster turning and a little easier. We talked about the edge holder rips. The turn initiation is pretty fast. Like with this, it was like right where I wanted it, like fast to medium fast. This was a little slower to me, but you know,
for me it was super fast because it's like quite narrow.
Yeah. And so it's all perspectives, but you know, when you size up the right boot size to the board width, or you know, board size, you'll find that this turns pretty quick. If you size up or size down, it might change, but that's how it always works. Carving is pretty fun.
Super fun.
I felt like equal carving potential between the Ultra Mind Expander and this. They carved the same. You know, I was only on, this is the 65 wide, so only Grant got to ride that. But I rode the 58 at the demos of the regular Flagship, and that did a great job for what it was. But I really, if I had a 61 Flagship or a 64 Flagship, you know, it would probably carve just about the same for me. It just depends on the personality you feel. But I think they both have that kind of like hybrid camber where it carves well. It's not as amazing as you would think because of that extra rocker. So you get more forgiving ride and a more floaty ride, but you don't have that like super spring out of those like mostly camber boards with just a little bit of early rise.
It's true.
You know, if you really want...
An example of that would be, would you say like maybe some of the Karua shapes?
Sure.
Have like a lot of
Karua,
spring.
yeah, Karua, or like the Burton Flight Attendant.
Optimistic?
Or, yeah, a little more with the Optimistic for sure. Or like, you know, like some of those directional cambers, or something like, you know, like the GNU Molaire, that's pretty much mostly camber with just a touch of early rise.
Right.
Those are just gonna spring much better out of a turn and really give you that full camber drive. But this carbon Flagship is gonna straight line better, it's gonna be more forgiving, it's gonna have more effortless float and roll in powder. And it's going to be a little better on uneven terrain because if you get off your game, it's not going to fuck you.
It's super stable at high speeds.
Yeah.
Really, really confidence inspiring.
Yeah, and switch, it's actually kind of doable. It's better than the Ultra Mind Expander, but not as good as the Frontier and not as good as the Jones Mountain Twin or anything like that. But if you need to traverse switch, it's got a lot of nose and it's got a lot of tail. And it's got some early rise, and you can do it. I did that a bunch of times. I would switch down a long cat track because I was tired, you know, of going regular, and it worked fine. Now, uneven terrain, I'd much rather ride all day on the Flagship, and that to me is kind of the deal breaker between carbon Flagship and Flagship. I'd much prefer this just like smooth, and it's so much more forgiving this year. Since they went to SWS from GST, it's mellowed, and then now this new version is even more mellow than the old SWS. So it used to be just this mess. Every Jones board was a mess in hard snow. They were just so stiff. And then it's just gotten hard to uneven terrain. It's just gotten better and better and better every year. They've mellowed it out. They've just relaxed. They've chilled the fuck out, and it does a much better job. Even these boards do a much better job at uneven terrain, but I'd much rather be on the Flagship, especially if you're gonna ride resorts a lot and you're gonna ride Saturdays, Sundays. Yeah. You definitely want that board over this. But if you're gonna ride good conditions, mainly good conditions, and you're not gonna see a lot of hard, uneven
today,
snow.
I'll take this thing.
Yeah, probably it's a little damper. It's damper, it's faster, it's more aggressive, where this is a little more mellow, but they're both on the way on the.
They're both aggressive
both
boards.
bombers.
Yeah.
They're super bombers. And you know, for powder, I love the new taper. The old Jones Flagship wasn't much of a slouch. Now, compared to the Mind Expander, not the Ultra Mind Expander, but the Mind Expander, it's really hard to think of anything else when you're thinking of powder than that. But I rode this in some pretty deep powder, and it did a great job. So yeah, if you're looking for a daily driver and you want to compromise a little bit in powder, this is fine. When set all the way back, it's got some really good directional float. We were riding it up to like waist deep snow, and then some thick, ugly snow, and this thing just jammed. It did its job well. It has very effortless, easy float off the back foot. You know, I think though, if I had a 58 Ultra Mind Expander, that might be a little smoother, a little easy turning in the trees than this, but this is a much better straight liner. And I was surprised at how damp the Ultra Mind Expander is compared to even this. But this just has a little more like, that carbon fiber gives it a little more like lively feel. You can feel that spring and pop out of it where you couldn't really as much with the Ultra Mind Expander.
That's true.
Which of the two did you like better, Ultra Mind Expander or this?
It's a tough call, actually. This one's got a lot of spring and pop. It was cool, like going over a few little side hits there on leeway coming down. Trying to get some air on this thing was really fun. Yeah, I guess I'd have to spend more time on them. Did like the sort of little loose feel of the Ultra Mind Expander. A little less locked in.
That, like,
but this is a bomber, so it really comes down to like the rider, you know, and then like you said, the conditions are right. Today's pretty much perfect groomers and some okay powder, so there's no complaints with that.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was like, this is more slashy than it used to be.
Yeah.
But when it was only a few mil of taper, now it's like 12. It's definitely more slashy and more surfy than it used to be, but it's still not as slashy and surfy as the Christensen Ultra Mind Expander. Right. That thing just, you know, just really, it really felt more surfy.
Yeah.
So all in all, I mean, this isn't for everybody. 9 times out of 10, I'd probably recommend the Flagship, and I'd rather want to own that than I would this, just because I like that everyday driver. I want to know that I can take that board out whenever I'm in the mood for it and have fun. Where this comes with you know, some warnings. But it's, you know, it's like, don't take this out on super hard snow. But if you want just a bomber and an aggressive ride, and you've got just a green ham sandwich of cash, because this is like what, like 900 bucks now or something like that.
I would choose performance personally, this over the Flagship, and you know, it could just be aesthetics.
Yeah, but you're not a weekend guy.